Well, right now at my age, I'm a pastor of a church, Peace Baptist Church, and had no idea that I would be where I am today when I was just a child born. In fact, dealing with being born, I even talked to my mom this morning just to confirm the story that I've heard all my life and make sure that I wasn't embellishing it. But I really was really not expected to really live. The doctors expected me to be a stillborn child. And my mom went on with the pregnancy because she just believed that the child that she was carrying was going to be a child that God was going to give to her, and I was going to be a special child in some way. She felt that in her heart.
I didn't really know what my life would be like being a mother and a wife. I really didn't. But then when I found out that I was pregnant with this boy or girl, I didn't know what was going to come to pass. And so I had to trust God because I really didn't know what my life would become. All I wanted to do was to be a good mother and first of all, be a good wife. And so I had to lean on God for understanding because I was raised on a farm and we didn't have all the amenities that I moved into with my husband. And all I wanted to do was just be that wife and be that mother and be that awesome person that I could look back and say, God, you did all of this because, and I still say that today, that God, you did this. I had no part in it except to trust you and believe that you would take me through.
My mom was about 90 pounds, and so they were very worried about her physical weight and her physical health. And then I was a huge baby.
I was weighing like less than 100 pounds, maybe 98, 99 pounds. And, and I was trying to carry a big child. and strange things was happening to me as I was doing this because I was trying to be a housekeeper, a wife, and then trying to take care of a house that I knew nothing about. And when Tyrone's was birth, ready to be delivered and come into this wonderful world that God created, I had complications. I had none while I was carrying him, but his birth was a 3-day delay for him coming forth. But even in that, I had to trust God. I had to believe that what God has given me, I felt like Mary. I felt like if God give it to me, it's okay. So I had to trust him to make sure that that I leaned on him and trusted in him. And that's what I did. But then his birth was like the doctor says, well, something is going on and you have complications, but are you willing to go through with this? My answer was yes, yes. This is what God has created me for, and I'm going to do it one way or the other. Me or him, it doesn't matter.
And they were really concerned that I was not going to turn in the womb, or that I would actually just die in the womb itself because of other complications that were going on. But my mom chose to have me, and so I'm thankful for that. I wouldn't be here otherwise. But not only was I okay, but she was okay. And I just take that as a special time because it's like, oh, God, you had a purpose. I go back to Jeremiah, 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and I had a calling on your life, to be a prophet unto the nations. And I take that scripture, that Jeremiah 1:5, kind of as a life verse in some way, because I feel like God knew me and he had a plan for my life, even in the womb, even as doctors and others thought that I should, not be here and that I would cause pain to my mother, kind of like Jabez. That's probably why I love Jabez so much. I preach every year. I preach a sermon on Jabez, and it's probably a more of a autobiographical message time for me, because Jabez caused so much pain for his mother, and his mother called him Jabez, which the name Jabez means pain, and I came forth in pain for my mom. But I had such a wonderful mom that she didn't call me pain like Jabaz's mama did. My mother called me her love. My mom is the biggest cheerleader probably in my whole life, and has been all throughout my life. No matter what I ever tried to do, she would, kind of, you can do this, you can do this, you got it. Even if it was not that good, it was the greatest thing she's ever seen. And so I love Jabaz because he had this great faith, because he had great faith in his God. Whereas I have a little bit better than that. I had great faith in God, a family that believed in God, but also a mom who believed in me. And so I'm just thankful and grateful for that. And that even before I was even alive, out of the womb, she saw something or felt something or sensed something would be very special about my life. And it certainly has proved to be that. So I came into this world, and from the very beginning kind of had health challenges. Had asthma as a child growing up. I remember mom and having to, put that ointment on my chest and rock me to sleep. I remember times of her singing or just praying in the kind of the dim light of the bedroom while I was wheezing. I remember that growing up. And so I had health challenges growing up in some way. I think I had a healthy childhood, though, in the sense of relationships and friendships. Our house was, my very first memories, was the home where everybody came to. And so even as a little young child, I just remember little kids my age, 4, 5, 6 years old, all playing in the yard, all those things. And so even though I had health challenges, asthma and all these other things, I remember playing sports. I remember playing football and basketball and baseball in our yard. Our yard looks, when I go to a yard there, it looks so small. Back then it looked like a big field, and it really was, big for kids who couldn't hit the ball that far. But I played in the creek that was right next to our house. I did not have any health challenges that forbid me from actually participating in everything a child would do in the neighborhood. So I remember that from a little child growing up. So I thank God for mom and a dad who didn't have any restrictions, on me as it relates to my health.
Like, awesome little fellow, he would just like be doing things that I know that was beyond him, but I didn't understand it. But Charles and I was just amazed at seeing him doing things earlier than what he was supposed to be doing. And he had to wear braces once he began to walk. We didn't notice anything while he was crawling or anything like that. But once he began to walk, we noticed that something was wrong with his legs, with one leg. So we had to, we didn't know what to do then at all, did we, Charles? But we carried him to Duke Hospital, and they put braces on him.
I think somewhere around 5 years old or 6 years old, they began to take the braces off, or I didn't have to wear them as much. But I had to have braces on my legs really all my whole childhood. But I remember playing ball and doing everything with these, it wasn't a problem. And I had good community around me, good friends that lived around there, that nobody ever teased me about that. My brother came to church one day here some years ago, and he told everybody the nickname that I'd had back then was Tink Tink, because I had those legs, but it wasn't in a way of criticizing, because people supported me. I just remember really good friendships that really supported me. We had some really good neighbors next door, Ronnie and Wayne, and later Junior. They all were just like our best buddies. I mean, we did everything together. I mean, we woke up in the morning and we were together from the time we woke up to the time we would go till the lights came on, when you had to be back in the house,
Back then, it's not, like it is now. The whole neighborhood, they raised the kids. Like your neighbor, if something happened, they're going to bring it to us, and we take it to them. Mm-hmm. And we had a basketball goal in the backyard, and Joe and Tyrone, they seemed like all the kids, they want to come here and play in the yard.
Gerald, and I can just talk about all the different folk up and down the neighborhood, Veronica, different people, Tawana, all these different folk that we had in our neighborhood, that we were just a close-knit community and really protected each other in a lot of ways. So
we didn't ever have no trouble much, and it was just a place that all the kids, they love to come and enjoy themselves, and we thankful for that.
I really have warm feelings about growing up as a child. Our town is Roxboro, North Carolina, and it would be somewhere like 60, 70 miles from the fictional town of Mayberry, okay? Mayberry, Andy Griffith's show. Some of y'all may remember that. And it was a fictional show, but Andy Griffith grew up he was the sheriff in a little small Mayberry town with, everything was kind of perfect. And I'm gonna be frank with you, I felt like our town was very much like Mayberry, very just a country town where the really good, strong values, where you could leave your door unlocked. I don't know if we ever locked our door growing up. You can go in the back, at least the front doors would be locked, but the back door was always open. So you can go in, and not just our house, but everybody's house is like that. I don't remember a lot of crime. I don't remember hardly any really negative things that happened to anybody in our neighborhood, in our community. It was just a really, really tight-knit community. And I think that informed me growing up like that and having a church, wanting it to feel like a community and a family. And so in some ways, I probably try to recreate what my childhood experience was in Peace Baptist Church, so that we're a church about the size. Back when I was growing up, our town was about the size of our church right now. and so in some ways, I probably try to recreate Roxboro or Mayberry in Peace Baptist Church. Growing up, asthma issues, legs, stuttering. I think y'all heard me talk about stuttering a lot as a child.
As I said, I had no idea what to do. And sometimes when you have children, you don't know what to do. You just got to trust God, and God will lead you through. And so my mother was old-fashioned, and she says, when he started stuttering, you slap him in the mouth with a dish rag. I said, oh my God. So one day he was doing it so much until I was in the kitchen, and of course I was washing dishes at the sink. And I says, Tyrone, I said something to Tyrone. I don't know what I said to Tyrone, but he couldn't get his words out. So I had the dish rag in my hand, and I took it and I slapped him in the mouth with the dish rag. He hollered like, what in the world is going on with Mama? But it's for some reason or another, I trusted what my mother said, and again, I trusted in God. And sure enough, he came out of it a little bit. I had to do the same thing, and I did the same thing for my second child too. And now I'm not a abusive mother. Please don't look at me and think that I am that. But I ended up slapping both of my boys in the mouth with a dish rag because my mama told me it. And again, I said I had to lean in, not to my understanding, but to God's understanding.
And I remember talking so fast, and sometimes it was probably more talking more fast than stuttering, even though stuttering was a part of it, because my thoughts, what I had in my head, I couldn't get it out my mouth fast enough, so my thoughts always ran more quicker than I could actually speak. And so I was trying to catch up with what was in my head. And so that's very true even to today. I kind of feel like that sometimes. I feel like I'm, what I have going on in here, I don't have enough cadence coming out of my mouth to be able to really, get the words out. And so a lot of that stuttering was just learning to slow down the way in which I think and how I process thinking, so that I can just slow down my speech. And that's probably how I was able to overcome the stuttering, was just kind of slow down my speech in that sense. So I was about 7 years old, maybe 8 years old, when my grandmother and her small church, Quinn Chapel, put me in a little play at their vacation Bible school that we had.
It was Quinn Chapel that did this. I used to stutter when I was a kid. I used to stutter a little bit. He used to laugh at me when I talk. And I remember coming to vacation Bible school every summer. And we were about to do a play for vacation Bible school. The young lady, I don't know who it was who was leading the class, she said, I need to pick the lead. It was a lot of lines. Most of the lines in the little play happened to be somebody who could remember who could talk. surprisingly, she pointed me out and says, Tyrone, you play that part. I was like,
And it was kind of strange because some of the kids were like, well, you're going to give that to him because he can't talk, you know.
I can't do that. Everybody else in class said, he can't do that.
But when I got up there to do that play and to do that, it was like the lights came on. I mean, it was like all of a sudden my speech was slow. I was able to really connect with the audience.
Somehow she saw something in me I didn't see myself.
Glory be to God. Hallelujah. Glory. That's all right.
And it was probably the first time I kind of knew that somehow my life was going to be about dealing with audiences in some way. Had no idea it'd be preaching now. I mean, it wasn't like I knew God was calling me. I don't have that experience, but I do have the experience that I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life in front of people and having an effect on words touching people. And that was a big part of I just remember that moment. I mean, I can literally see, I got the chance back in the when was this? 2021, I believe it was. I got a chance to do their 150 or something anniversary, you know, and go back there. And it was so emotional for me to be invited back. And literally they still have the church is still very much the exact same as I was when I was a kid, except, you know, of course, new carpet, and they've done some alterations, but pretty much the setup is the same. And I was able to go and stand on the spot where I really kind of knew what my life shape should have looked like. And it was very emotional. And so I got up there to speak, and you know, if you ever get the tape of that, if there was a couple people that took videos of that, it took me about a minute, 2 minutes to gather myself, because I just broke down in tears because I knew that was a holy spot for me.
You know, when you stand on holy ground, this is kind of holy ground for me.
Amen.
Right
Glory be
there.
to God. Acts what?
Which chapter is that?
20.
Chapter 20 of Acts.
Amen.
Amen.
As he grew up and started kindergarten, started school, he excelled in everything that he did. And I mean, the teachers, they were amazed with him. And everybody loved to see Tyrone coming, because he not only at that young age helped other kids, but he mentored them. He mentored to them. They looked to him like the helper, like almost like the teacher. We started going to church and Sunday school, and he began to teach Sunday school, not Sunday school. He began to teach the Bible study before the whole congregation. And what amazed me was that he was a little thing. The kids was much taller than Tyrone, because Tyrone was short. We couldn't even see Tyrone, but the voice that he had in the middle of all those kids, and we could hear his voice, and he would be telling them a story, telling them about life. And I said to myself, I said, how in the world does he know all this stuff? Because I know I'm a Christian, but I had no idea that he would be teaching stuff like that from the Bible, and teaching it like a little man that was sent by God. I had no idea. And people would come to me and tell me after he had been speaking, and they said, you know, I know you're proud of him. And they said, well, we are too. And he says, it's amazing how he knows stuff, how he can mentor to those kids, and those kids seem to understand and walk away with understanding. And I says, they asked me one time, or several times, he says, do you all do this at home? I said, no. I said, but he do see me pray, and talk to God, and his dad too. But I don't know. It's got to be God, because it's sure not Charles and me.
Well, around that time, you know, I guess about 6 or 7 when that happened, and then my mom and my grandmother put me into plays. The children's little theater that we had there at Roxboro Little Theater, children's theater. I was in adult plays like Oliver with adults. I did plays with Oklahoma with adults, playing different roles. And then I got to be a part of children's little theater where we did 2-3 plays a year, especially in the summer, but even during the year, all doing elementary school. And that just really helped me. And every time I would get up to do my part, the stuttering and stuff went away, and it was just amazing. So Miss Guy, later Mr. Mooney, those people really helped me to understand, again, how to connect with audiences. And I just love the theater. I love the stage.
Tyrone, he used to be in a lot of plays at the school. at the theater. We have a theater here in Roxboro called the Curve Theater. And Tyrone used to be on stage. And sometimes he had 150, 200, 300, lines. No pay. But I said, how did? And I would tell Rachel, I said, how did he remember all that? How can he do all that? And it was just amazing. And I think then God was building him, using him to, for be what he do now. And I like I told Tyrone the other day, I said, how can you do all that and talk all that and don't repeat nothing? And he said it's a gift from God.
I still go by there every time I go to Roxboro, even if I'm there for just a day. I always go and ride by it, because it was a really critical period and point of my life, a place that really shaped me, and I really thank God for that experience. So theater, all those things happened. But at the same time, around 6-7 years old, I really began to my father and my granddad really start having a major influence in my life around 6-7 years old as well. They've always been there, been strong influences.
When he was my father was a contractor, back then as Tyrone got old, and Tyrone used to go with them, on the job and do stuff.
My father and my granddaddy and my great grandfather, they were very much builders in that area. My great grandfather and even great grandfather and others, they worked with the Duke family and doing some things at Duke University. A lot of the stone work that you see there in Duke was done by our family. It's beautiful stuff that still stands to this day. My grandfather had a construction company, and my father was also in construction. He worked doing buildings and building skyscrapers and mostly the foundation work, cement work, and not cement work, but cinder block work. When big, huge malls, skyscrapers, in the 70s is when really the economy started growing, and we start building these big monstrosities and all these things. And my dad was a part of that. My grandfather was a part of starting to build not just the smaller houses, but he built these big, I call them Mac mansions, huge, big old houses. And people in Durham and Hillsboro and Yanceyville and places all around Roxboro, they would get my grandfather to contract to actually build these big houses. I mean, huge, 4, 5, 6 bedroom houses with swimming pools and all that stuff. And I got to, see that in every summer or during the week in the school year, to be able to go to these places and kind of work with them and all those things, and to be impacted by what my dad and my grandfather did. My granddaddy would hire guys who were drug addicts, alcoholics, guys who didn't have a bank account, and he would hire these guys to be laborers, to make the cement, to bring the bricks in the wheelbarrow, to do all the things that need to be done to build the scaffolding. And he would do that, and I would get in the truck with them, and we'd be on the back of the truck. Back then, you didn't have to wear seatbelts and all that stuff, so we'd have, you'd be 7, 8 guys on the back of a pickup truck, and about 4 or 5 inside the cab, either me inside, or most of the time I loved to ride outside with the guys, but I would ride 30, 40 minutes to these jobs with these guys and smell alcohol on their breath and all that stuff, and watch my grandfather shape these men's lives who were, who couldn't stay sober except Monday. He would require them and I would always smell the liquor on Mondays, during the summer in particular. But during the week, they couldn't drink until Friday, because they had to work for him Monday through Friday, and they would be paid by cash, because they didn't have checking accounts. It was different back then, and those things. And he'd pay them by cash, and then most of the time they'd spend up all their money by Monday, so they'd be back to work so they could make more money to get drunk the next weekend. But I saw my grandfather really shape these men, and not just leave them as drunks and use them, but really change a lot of their lives. And a lot of those men, because of some of the things, became sober, got out of the alcohol and some of the abusive things they were doing with their bodies or their own families. And I really saw life change take place. And again, that influenced me to who I am today, watching my family invest in the broken and the marginalized and the down and outs, and I'm forever grateful for that experience and that exposure early in life. And it really, really showed me that you got to go for the least of these. And so I thank God for that. And my dad as well, building things. He started to build an apartment across the street from my house. To this day is a it's apartment. It's a whole apartment thing, but a big it was just a big, huge valley, if you would, across the street from my house. And my dad, I remember he put up a sign. It was a little yellow sign, and he put red paint, and he put on there dirt dump. And so because it would have cost so much money to fill that hole up, that big old huge valley up with dirt. And so what he did was, because there was building going on in my little small town of Roxboro, and we didn't live far from downtown, he had the genius of putting a little sign up so that the big construction crews that had all this dirt that they were excavating there didn't have to drive way out somewhere to dump the dirt. They could just go a few blocks away, or less than a half a mile away from downtown and these other places, and dump dirt there and get back to the job quicker. And so basically that little area over a couple of years grew all the way up, so where it was now level with the street, and it was no longer a valley. Now it's a place that you can actually build on. And I watched my dad do that, to bring a dream out of the earth, literally. And that was powerful. And I had a picture that somebody who was an artist drew for me once. And in one of our moves, I misplaced it and I can't find it any longer. But it was a picture of my dad, who would be inside the house, across in our little living room. We had a little window looking out of the door there, across the street to that area. For many years, late at night, as I would get ready to go to bed, or I'd get up in the middle of the night, I would see my dad staring across the street at that, out of that window across, and just envisioning what that little dirt dump would look like in the future. And I remember, even sometimes what are you doing? He was dreaming, and I didn't know. He never really said that. He never really said, I'm dreaming about an apartment and that stuff. But as I grew older, and as I began to have dreams of my own, I realized that became an image for me of that you can create something out of nothing. In Hebrew, ex nihilo, right? God spoke the world into existence out of nothing. He created something out of nothing. And I saw my dad kind of do that, in a sense, be a creator and bring that apartment out of the ground. And he, myself, my grandfather, other individuals did the same thing, bringing guys there every weekend. All of them worked regular jobs on the weekday. My dad had his job working with his construction company that he was a part of. But on the weekends, they built those apartments, and with our own sweat and blood, brought them out of the dirt. And that, again, is another thing that inspired me to try to create something as it relates to spiritual building, but not just buildings, but people, and building people's lives and seeing transformation happen. So I'm eternally grateful for my father and my grandfather for that influence that they had on my life. And then my grandmother, who I said, who took me out of Roxboro. I mean, sick every summer. I'm in plays. I'm doing stuff with my grandmother, who we're celebrating in 2022, August the 9th, 2022. We're celebrating her 105th birthday, and hopefully she's still with us at the time that this is going to be released, that we're taping today. But she just has no signs of slowing down, even at 105. But when I was a kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, 9, 10, all that, she would, every summer, she'd take a trip somewhere, Pennsylvania, Virginia, or go visit family in Baltimore. We would go to Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina, different things. And she would always take me along with her on the bus, on the Greyhound buses. We would get on there, or we'd go on a trip with some group that she would connect to, and go to the Amish country and those kind of things that I remember. And it took me out of Roxboro. because many of the people who lived in Roxboro at that time kind of stayed within, the confounds of the city, and we would venture to Durham, which is about 30-minute drive maybe, but you wouldn't we wouldn't go pretty much further than Durham. Maybe Hillsboro, maybe Danville, Virginia, which is another 30 minutes north of us. We might do something like that, but beyond that little radius, 60-mile radius around the town, most people in my community and didn't venture outside of that a lot. And so I was so thankful for my grandmama, who gave me a chance to see the world beyond that 60-mile radius, and beyond just going to visit family that was in Baltimore. I just love that, and it gave me this adventurous spirit of saying, I'm going to see the world, and which is why now I've been on 6 continents and looking forward to getting on Antarctica, so I can say that I was able to step foot on 7 continents, to preach on 7 continents, in my life. That's really one of my bucket lists. I don't know if I'll ever get to do that, because it's hard to get to Antarctica, but I want to do that one day if the Lord allows it. But I credit my grandmom for that, taking me to along with my mom, taking me to the plays and play rehearsals and all the big schedule we had to do there, but also to, seeing the world. And so I'm just thankful for that, and knowing there's something beyond this town. So I just appreciate that. So those are some of those early memories of growing up in Roxboro. I also have to kind of speak to the race issue, because I kind of grew up where black and white got along. We didn't really have a lot of racial tension that was very overt when I was growing up as a kid. I played with black kids as well as white kids. I was a part of the integration of the school system. I went to elementary school, I believe in 1970 is when I actually entered kindergarten. But we were that first class that really truly integrated the area. I was in the first class, and I remember Miss Clayton's class, Miss Davis, those early classes, and I just remember being around some white people who really were positive about integration. I didn't have them calling you the N-word. Those whites that because the plays that I were in they weren't black theater, it was white people. They were so committed to integration and racial reconciliation. So the whites that I grew up with in my community, in the schools that I went to as well, I could not say they were prejudiced. They might have it, but they hid it really well if they were. But they really were about integration. So, which is why today I really try to seek for racial reconciliation. Why we joined the Southern Baptist Convention after we started our church. We were independent church when we started in '93, but I soon joined the Southern Baptist about 2-3 years after starting Peace Baptist Church, and I really again have to credit the whites that I had, the teachers, those influencers in my life who showed me that we don't have to be separate. The power of integration and us working together. And so that's why I kind of push our church today into these corners, trying to make sure that we're just not, us four and no more, but we really see the larger beauty in God's kingdom, and really speak to that. And so I just thank God for that. So it was a lot. So I just think that's important to kind of talk about, what shapes me, and my hope for reconciliation. I am definitely frustrated with what I see happening in our world today, because I think we're reverting back to more division, and I think racism is raising its head again. But how do I say this? I hold out a hope that we can get back to what we could get back to the dream of what we could be, the possibility of what we could be, as Martin Luther King says, black and whites hold hands together and sing that song, free at last, free at last. We black men and white men, Jew and Gentile, we're able to reconcile together. I still hold that same hope that King had as well. So
this note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
A lot of this area was really shaped by just what I was exposed to again, you know, even in my own home, my heart for the people who are broken and hurting. Really, again, my parents do that. I talk about in my book, the introduction of the book that I have that's out on outreach, that where my outreach heart came from was really my parents. I would wake up in the morning. I remember this vividly. One morning, waking up, and my mom and dad were talking in the kitchen, and at that time my bedroom was right outside of the kitchen, and I woke up, and I hear my mom and dad's voice, but I'll hear another lady's voice, and I hear weeping and crying. And so I kind of go in and I peek around and go through the living room. You can kind of peek in and kind of see into the kitchen there. And my mom and dad are at a table, and I'm able to look, and there's this woman there, and you can see kind of she was bloody and she had blood. Found out later that she was had been domestically assaulted by her husband, and ran to our home for relief.
My ministry is like when I see somebody that's having a problem that needs some help, because I look at it in this aspect that it could be me. And some people have walked by. My house is close to the road, and some of the we think one auxiliary did come and visit us, and so they found out, they knew that we were close to the road. But this house beside the road is a place where people pass by, they admire, they some of them need some help, some of them need a glass of water. And somebody told me, says, you don't need to be going in the house getting them a glass of water, because, you know, people are so bad now that they might hurt you. And I says, well, let me tell you, this house beside the road is God's house. It's not Charles and I. He's only lending it to us for a little while. And if someone need a glass of water, because I heard a story a long time ago when I was growing up, says, if Jesus knocks on your door, you're going to let him in.
That my parents would have various people from the community come to the house at different times, because they were known as people who you could trust and safe place to be able to be. And it's kind of strange. My mom now, she serves in domestic violence centers and helping individuals who have been beaten and bruised that way.
So ministry is not all the time being out being in the pulpit and going to different places to preach and stuff like that. Your ministry is in your heart, and it's what God gives you. Now, I talk more than what I used to talk, but God has grown me too, and it's not all what you say you do, is what you do. And I'm just so grateful to God that he allowed us to be able to have a little snack and some running water around here, so we can share what we got and what we have to other people in this community. And everybody knows Charles and I here in Roxboro, North Carolina. And if you say, do you know Charles and Rachel Barnett, they're going to say yes. And they can even tell you where we live. The house beside the road.
I remember, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to make sure that I have that kind of impact on people's life is what was important. But in order to do that, I was going to have to make sure that I stayed good in school. So let me just say, I was not a good student.
Elementary school, we never had a problem with him. High school, we didn't have no problem with him. Yes, we did. I forgot. He used to take the car when he got his license, and we didn't know where my car was, and people like down towards 49 North had to get him out of a couple troubles that he got in because they skipped school.
One, because I just couldn't stay focused. It was just, school was just absolutely boring to me. I'll just be honest with you. It's like, oh my God, can y'all just get to, filling out papers, doing standardized tests. I probably could have passed the test if much better if I hadn't have just went down. They give you those, you got to fill in the bubbles, the A, B, C, D. I remember for years, I wouldn't even read the material. I just bubble in stuff. So my record would show that I was probably not a very good student. Therefore, I got the teachers and others kind of put you in a category, and they kind of, they kind of say you're not able to do it. But nobody never really ever really helped to strengthen my academic side. And so I kind of grew up, to be honest with you, not thinking that I couldn't do school. In fact, I had a teacher in math, and I was taking a math class, and the teacher says, "You'll never learn." In fact, she told me, "You can't learn." And it just affirmed the fact of what my scores showed, but none of them really knew that all I was doing was just filling out the bubbles, because it was boring to sit there and try to read all these things, and deal with all this stuff. And I would just sit in class, so I was better at talking and being the public face.
He was writing newsletters and stuff like that to let the community know what was going on in Person County High School. We were proud of Tyrone. We really were. Now, I'm not saying that he was that he did everything like he's supposed to do. He didn't.
And I had my partners in crime were two guys who really played a big impact in my life as well. Because we believe, the name was Bert and Alex. Bert and Alex were my two best friends growing up, because we just believe, and all of us pretty much the same way, we just bubbled in stuff. We did not really take school very serious at all. And we just encouraged each other, because maybe they don't believe in us, but we believe in ourselves. And so we would encourage each other to do different things that we would do all throughout junior high school and even high school itself.
He'd get on the phone and he'd be talking to his friends, walking up and down all over the house. He always moved when he talked. He didn't stand still. And I would be trying to hear what was going on, but I guess I just didn't have the ear for it. And so I kind of left him alone, and his friends would come here to our house, and he would invite them here to eat, and they would sit and play music and talk to each other and stuff. But I never did try to get in Tyrone's business or anything like that. And I tried to at times, but it didn't work.
I got all the way through, junior high school, kind of flubbed through it, junior high school, get into high school, and again, I'm sitting there in 10th grade, and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for my opportunity to be able to push myself forward. How do I get to be known in this school? Well, the very first day, I'll never forget, that the intercom comes on, and the person is giving the morning announcements. And I remember asking the teacher in the class, who's doing that? Because I knew it was a young person, it wasn't a teacher or anybody. Who's doing it? They said, that's the president of the school. And I made in my mind right then that before I graduate, I'm gonna be the president of the student council. I'm gonna get this.
Tyrone, we stay in a southern town, but it's not, the people are nice. I think Tyrone was the first black student council member of the school here.
I forgot,
and that was a big accomplishment then. And all the students looked up to him, the black student and the white student.
And the teachers.
And the teachers, and that was a blessing right there. And like I said before, God was still working on him. Just building him to grow and grow and grow.
And so that year in 10th grade, I ran for Sergeant of the Arms, and I won Sergeant of the Arms. I on and on and on. I just remember, I knew that I may not have the academic prowess that others have, but I'm a good leader, and I can lead, and I'm gonna have to make sure my leadership speaks for me. And so I kept looking for ways to be in leadership roles to compensate for my poor academics, if that makes any sense. So that, and I did that, and all throughout middle school and all throughout high school, and again, just enjoying that whole piece of that. And it seems like a lot of room was made for me in that regard. What the sad thing is that I got all the way to graduation, and I'll never forget, we were in graduation, I am on the program to introduce Dr. Ergel. I don't know this man to this day, but I remember his name, Dr. Ergel, who was our keynote speaker. And because I was student council president, I was slated to be the person to introduce him. Well, the issue is you only had to have 18 credits to graduate. I had 17 and a half credits. I did not have enough credits to graduate. The principal and the school and everybody was embarrassed that the president of the student council was not going to graduate because I couldn't pass a computer science class that we had and on logarithms. I remember on logarithms, and I just could not pass this final on logarithms, and I was not going to graduate. And they set me in a room. This is like 2 or 3 days before graduation, and so that I could pass the test. School is over. Everybody's gone home, but they're going to make sure I get that half a credit so I can graduate. And I literally had to take this test 3 times and to be able to pass it so that I could actually not embarrass the school system and be the first president who did not graduate from school. And so I hate the fact that I squandered those years. I had great teachers. I had a great experience. I loved high school. I loved middle school. I had a great experience. I had a lot of fun, but I just didn't learn the academics. I probably had ADHD, hyperactivity, and just, all over the place doing a lot of different things. But again, I kind of hate the fact that I had really nobody, even the administrators and advisors that I had, nobody to really, really, really focus me to say, you need to study. Except for one lady, Miss Elliott, who was my history teacher in the 11th grade and the 12th grade. She was history teacher, and Miss Elliott was the only one who didn't put up with my nonsense. And I did really well in history, which is why now I have a love for history because of Miss Elliott. And she was the only one who said, you can do better than this. And I thank God for Miss Elliott and Miss Wiggins, an English teacher as well. Miss Wiggins is another one who in 12th grade who saw past all my foolishness and saw something greater in me that I didn't see in myself. So I became president of the high school student council. Do all kind of things in never was sports. I never did any sports myself, but I was always a part of the sports kind of a deal. And if you look at the yearbook for our year, they always pick out 9 seniors who are going to make it, outstanding seniors, and I was in that 9 outstanding seniors. And knowing that I probably didn't deserve to be there for academics, I was there not for academics. I was there because I just knew how to play the game to promote yourself and push yourself, And but when I finished school and I finished high school, I had nowhere to go. I had not really applied to college because just be honest with you, I didn't even take the SAT because I really didn't even think that I could pass it. Remember, I bubbled in everything, everywhere. I took the PSAT, but I bubbled in that too, and it was so bad. And then I just never took the SAT. And so when all my friends are all going to college, everybody's getting to go. Even my buddy Alex got himself together in the last years of his life, the 11th and 12th grade. He finally figured out academics was important. He got to be able to go to NC State. And so it wasn't too late for me, but I just never. So he went from our school to NC State with a scholarship. And I could have probably done that too if I had just hunkered down, but I had just squandered my years.
But Tyrone he had a knack for just not letting you know what was really going on.
Back then, they didn't have computer stuff like we have today. The grades were there. I actually stole a thing of grades and created new grades for myself to give to my parents to show them the grades that I had done. And so my parents thought that I was doing well because I knew how to fudge the system to make my parents think that I was doing better. And because I was doing all these things, of course, my parents thought I was doing better.
Back then it was hard to, with young people get a job. And I remember when Tyrone was in high school, and I think he worked at fast food place, and McDonald's. And then the amazing thing about Tyrone, he was we have a radio station here in Roxboro. And Tyrone was picked to be on the radio.
While I was there at McDonald's, because I was doing all these plays and things, the people in the city knew who I was, and the guy who was the station manager for WRXO, WKRX, Roxboro radio station, and he also was a player, a Roxboro Little Theater person as well in the adult theater, and he knew me from that. He came to the McDonald's and offered me a job on the radio. And literally, I remember taking off my apron, quitting the job right then. I didn't even finish out my shift. And I left and went with Harry to the radio station from there. He drove me to the radio station from there. And I started that next week as a radio DJ. And so I radio DJ'd all of my 10th grade, most of my 10th grade year, 11th grade, and 12th grade year as a radio DJ.
We used to listen to Tyrone on the radio playing music. That was just amazing. Just Albertson playing music, and from day one, I think all that was been his calling, like the way he talk at church and the way he do at church now. And sometimes I ask Tyrone, I said, "How can you remember? How can you do all that?"
High school was a lot of fun, a lot of dramas, those things, and I loved dating. I had one really good girlfriend that I had, and I won't name her name because she's now married with her own kids, and she's actually a very famous radio person. But she and I just, she taught me so much about relationships in a good way and some in a bad way as well. But I just value that relationship because it really taught me a lot about putting yourself at risk and being honest. It was probably the only relationship I ever had, other than Alex and maybe Bert and Alex, that I was really honest with another person, who I really was, and what that felt like to really for somebody to love you and to really know who you were. And so although that relationship kind of ended in a bad way when we ended, I really do value that relationship. And so a lot of who I am and what I think about love and all that stuff really comes from being formed in that piece. And so she would come to the radio station and became a radio person herself, went on to college and got a degree in radio and became a very famous radio person in that sense. And so I'm proud of that I had a part to play in that process. So that's a little bit of high school. High school was a lot of fun. But because I messed up high school, because I had squandered my academics, I had nowhere to go. So I did like a lot of other people do. I looked at the military. And so I went and I actually joined the military, the Army, the United States Army.
Serving your country is a special call. It's good for you, it's good for all. Not all who try fit the bill. It calls for brains, it calls for skill in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. But most of all, you'll earn the respect of the people and country you're there to protect. In the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, it's a great place to start.
I ended up joining the Army on her birthday, thinking that it would, I don't know what I was thinking. It was just stupid that I just went and joined the Army on her birthday I don't know what I thought that was going to do, but I thought that was going to impress her or something. I don't know. So after graduating from high school, I joined the military because that seemed to be the only option to be a military agent over in Germany. Scared to death in the delayed entry program, standing and raising my hand before Ronald Reagan. I joined the military to actually start my basic training in October of that year in 1983. So I just did not want to go to the military. Well, during that period of time, I ended up getting sick. I started having problems with my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't swim across the pool. I couldn't walk from one space to the other without, feeling winded. Had started having these lesions and these huge bumps on my skin all over. Eyes started having big spots that began to happen in my eyes. I could see, but I had like black spots that would appear, floaters they called them, that would be really huge that went in my eyes. So we went to the hospital in Durham, and they did all kind of tests on me, thinking it was a cancer, because it seemed like it had just affects all the different parts of my body, some lymphoma type of cancer, but it was not that. They took, that's why I have the scar on my here, and I have a couple scars on my arms where they took out gashes of the lesions on my arms. Different places around, they took different spots. They ended up coming back and finding out that after taking some of the lymph nodes and some of the other tissue off my body, that I had sarcoidosis. Sarcoidosis is like a sarcoma type of cancer but it just affects all parts of your body, and there is no cure. They don't know why you get it. They don't know how to really get rid of it. And some people, it goes into remission, and some of them, they deal with it, and it takes, you see people with oxygen tanks or whatever. And I was just like, oh my God. So I knew that diagnosis, however, was bad, but it also would and could get me out of the military, because I did not want to go into the military. I didn't. I just didn't think that was the path for me, and I wasn't saved. I had been in church, and all that stuff before, of course, growing up in church, and parents took me to church, but I not given my life and yielded my life to the Lord. And I did not want to go in the military. So my mother and I, we actually went and started the process to actually get medically discharged from the military. And I had to go through all that. So I never served a day in the military, and I got medically discharged without serving a day in the military. So they released me from that obligation because of the sarcoidosis. And but this was very pivotal. This was really what really brought me to really start seeking faith and seeking God, and beginning trying to figure out what I'm going to do about my life. I made a mess of it. I don't know what I'm going to do now. No military. I really messed up college, and so I'm really struggling. And I'm like, God, what are you going to do? And I really remember reaching out to God. And I remember one Wednesday night they were going to do Wednesday they were going to do a procedure on my liver. And back then they would take your liver and they would just like take a chunk of it, and it would always cause internal bleeding. I think they got different ways they do it now, but back then it kind of caused internal bleeding on most people when they would just take a piece of your liver to kind of do a diagnosis of my liver and what's going on with it. And I did not want to do that. And I remember crying out to God that night. And it was a Wednesday night, I'll never forget. And I made a profession. I said, God, if you heal me from this sarcoidosis, I will give my life to you. I will serve you. I will live for you. And please, because I do not want, this to be what my life is. And I'll give my life to you. And do you not know so they were going to do the test, that they were going to do the procedure that Thursday. And they always took blood and all this kind of stuff. Well, overnight, that Wednesday, they go back and they look at my blood, and everything's going like crazy. Scores and numbers were all off. Everything, all the other days, all the other weeks. But whatever happened, all of a sudden, my whole blood work totally changed. Everything was like almost to normal. And and so they said, we're not going to do the liver thing now. Something's going on. We're not going to do the liver thing, which is, I didn't want them to do that because I was scared of internal bleeding. I didn't know what that meant, but it don't sound good. So they stopped all the stuff, and literally within 4 or 5 days, I was at the hospital, and I was released, and the lesions started going away off my body. Everything started clearing up. The only residue that I have of the sarcoidosis back in 1983 was that my eyes, the damage that was done to my eyes, the floaters, I still see those black floaters still floating in my eyes. And a couple years later, I had to have laser surgery on my eye because my retina was becoming detached. And so I had to have it tacked back down. So I've had the laser surgery back when laser surgery started on eyes. So I was even in experimental ages of that. Now everybody does it, but I was like one of the first people all that happened to. And anyway, all of that was going on. And I really believe God healed me, because I believe that was the beginning of God, that he heard me cry out to him, and I made a commitment to him. Now, I didn't ask to be saved yet. But I did say, I will live for you, right? And I didn't pray all the prayers of Jesus, forgive me this and that. I didn't know all that to say that, even though the church had taught that. I didn't really know that. But that's when God, I really believe he really altered my life and really changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I could hear, and I had like a clarity after that. So I came out of the hospital. This summer, people are going to college. And I just very clear, guys, go to PTC, which is Piedmont Technical College, and UNCG had a program for that you could go to, if no matter what your grades look like, no matter how bad your grades were, that you could go and take general education classes at PTC by professors of University of North Carolina at Greensboro, that they would come to Roxboro and they would teach their classes, and you can get college credit, not from PTC, but for UNCG. And that's how, it was like, oh, that's how I'm going to get to go to college. So I enrolled into the first semester. Everybody else was in schools and colleges all over the place, but I stayed in Roxboro. Well, actually, I didn't stay in Roxboro. I actually left home, and I actually got an apartment. It's a whole lot there, but I actually, after some rooming houses that I got into and some other stuff, I ended up working for Bristol Myers and going to school at PTC in the evenings, but living in Durham, North Carolina. And I would drive, anyway, back and forth from there. And I just kind of figured out how to make life work, but it was difficult, working all day, going to school at night, and then living in a different city because I didn't want to stay home anymore. I wanted to kind of be independent. And so I had left home, and I was just working, and I was able to support myself to some degree, with the job. And I did pretty good the first semester and even the second semester, and I was able to, I had enough credits to actually now go to school and go to college. And so I ended up rolling in UNCG, really in Greensboro. A long story short, then I went to, I got to school and lost my mind because I never lived on campus. I always had my own apartment, my own place, but it was just a different world with all these students and girls and stuff that was going on, and I just couldn't focus. And so I ended up messing up that deal. And so then I ended up going to NC State where Alex and friends were, and went there and took a couple of classes, but I never was a good student in any of that as well. I kind of lost it when I lost that motivation for school and for those things. Then I went to North Carolina Central. They accepted me. I went through a whole year with North Carolina Central. This is about 1986, 1987, 96, 90, no, this is 1985. I'm sorry, 1985. I'm at North Carolina Central, and I just did terrible there, and pretty much got kicked out of school because I had all Fs, and they academically suspended, and so just terrible. I messed up again, but I had great friendships that I had started at NC State in Raleigh, North Carolina. And here I am again. My life is all messed up. I've messed up school again. I've been all types of jobs. I haven't even told y'all about the dozen jobs that I had. Everything from digging lagoons at IBM, not working in IBM. I worked for IBM, but I worked outside digging ditches basically for IBM to expand some of the stuff they had going on there. It's just crazy. Worked for different temporary agencies, worked a whole bunch of different things. I had job after job after job. I got a job at Dorothea Dix in Raleigh, working in mental health with students and there at Dorothea Dix Mental Health Hospital. And I worked third shift, taking care of kids, in the mental wards there. And at NC State with my friends, flunked out of that school, flunked out of North Carolina Central, flunked out of UNCG, flunked out of all these different places that I've gone to, and just trying to rebuild my life. I got there and started dating this young lady. It's a long story. I'm not going to get into that. Dating a young lady, and honestly, I just have to say the girl was one of my best girlfriends that and terrible that I was, ended up, without getting into it, ended up having a relationship with her, which set a whole nother course of events where I lost friendships, lost relationships, lost a lot of respect from a lot of people because they didn't respect me for the way in which I had treated my friend, which totally deserved all of the angst and the ugliness that people gave towards me from that. But I wasn't saved. I was just all about myself. And I really had to say I was a manipulator and a user in a lot of ways. And but I'm working and I'm doing stuff. And this young lady, I lied to her too about about my past and about what my future was going to be. I told her lies about that when I turned a certain age, I was going to get money from a will that my grandfather who was going to leave me in the will, all this stuff that wasn't true. And so she was paying for a lot of stuff, and it just turned into, and then that relationship turned sour. Her daddy found out how much money the young lady was giving me, and they started suing me for the monies that I needed to give back to her, and I've got debts now that I've massed up at Sears for. I got car loans. I got all this stuff, and I'm just a young kid, and I'm 21 years old, and my life is just in shambles again. And I'm like, God, what? It's just a lot. I could be here for hours if I told you all the tributaries my life went down. And I remember passing by I was walking on NC State's campus, not a student at that time, but walking by just a lot of friends, and I would hang out there. And my best friend Alex, as I told you, he was at that school, and I had met other relationships, other friends there at that school. And so I'm there and I'm walking past this thing called a cultural center. And that time, that's where the black folk would hang out on NC State campus, right? And it was like, it was like the cultural club is what it's called. We called it the CC. And so it was a place where you had, all your parties and stuff at. But on Sunday mornings, there was a church that met there. And so I was walking by the CC one weekend, one Friday or one Saturday morning, I'm not sure you'll remember. And there were three guys standing out, Shelton, Lee, and Harvey. And they were standing out front, never forget it. And as I was going by, I didn't want to talk to them because I knew they was the religious folk. Everybody knew them as the religious people on campus. And I was walking by, and Shelton yelled out to me and said, "Hey, what you doing this weekend?" And I turned around and said nothing. He invited me to come to church. Well, to be frank with you, that weekend, my life was kind of just going crazy, and I was trying to reconcile with this young lady, and she wanted to go to the service, and so I did go to the service, and I got up there and testified in the first time I ever went to that church service. And I got up in the worship service and made a big lie about my life and about I'm a believer and all this kind of stuff, and I really wasn't following the Lord or any of that stuff. And it was that afternoon that meant the girl was like, okay, this is over. After that church service, she had kind of said, this is over with me and her. And here I was going to my little studio apartment that I had there in Raleigh at that time, and left by myself, sitting in that room. And girlfriends left me. I just sat in church and lied about who I was to a whole group of folk in the church. Heard a message that he preached on Amazing Grace. Shelton had preached a message on Amazing Grace. And I was like, I need that grace. And I sat in that room by myself, had rented, nothing I had was real, The furniture that in there, I had rented it. It wasn't even mine. It belonged to Aaron Rents, I had nothing that was real, no relationship. I had hurt my best friend for my whole life, taken his girlfriend to where, he, because of his reaction to that, he kind of went off and got kicked off the campus because of some things that happened there. And he lost at campus and ended up going to North Carolina A&T, and his life changed there. And of course, like I said, he became a lawyer later on, and his life changed, but I lost that friendship. I lost respect from a lot of other folk, and I'm sitting there in this room, and I'm like, who am I? I lost it, and God spoke to me then, and I'm here. And I remember that message that Shelton preached about grace, and I just didn't believe that was grace for me, and could that be grace for me? Because I had done a lot of bad things. I'd lied, I cheated, I manipulated family, friends, everybody, didn't know who I was. But God's love came into that room by myself there. On the day I lied in church that I'm this great Christian, I decided then, you know what? Why can't that be true? Why can't I be what I just lied about today? Why can't that become the truth that I will let be my life story from now on? And I never forget, and I hope I don't cry through it because I usually can't make it when I think about this. But I remember kneeling by that little rented couch and did not knowing the words to say, but I called on God. I called on Jesus. Not that he hadn't been a part of my life, because I grew up, like I said, in church, and I had done a lot of things in church before, but never really letting church be in me. But I was so desperate, and I was at the end of my rope, and I just said, Jesus, if you can help me, if you can do anything with my life, I'll give you my life. I thanked him for saving me back years ago in the hospital from sarcoid. The doors that he'd opened for me that I knew he'd opened, and I just squandered it. And I said, if you just help me, I want to turn my life over to you, and I'll live for you forever. I had been telling you, alcohol had become a part of my life, alcohol and marijuana, but mostly alcohol. I wasn't really into drugs as much as I was alcohol. I drank and I drank and I drank all throughout, my college life. And I was tired. I had nowhere else to turn but him. And I promise you, he came into that room that night. I'm not saying physically a manifestation that I saw, but I felt the Holy Spirit. I felt like a wave came over me to where I knew that things were different, that whatever I had been in the past was forgiven, and that I could start a new life today. And it was April 21st, 1985. I remember it richly. And I gave my life to the Lord that night. And I went back to that same church that my ex-girlfriend now had introduced to me, and that Shelton had invited me to, and I heard him preach. And I went back, and I never stopped going to church from that time forward. There's only been a few times in my life, probably 10 times I can say on my hand, that I have probably missed church in my life since that day, not being in somebody's worship service. And I yielded my life to the Lord on April 21st, 1985. And I thank God for that. That church, United Student Fellowship, became my family. That Pastor Shelton Murphy became the mentor that I needed, the person who would tell me the truth about me. Shelton didn't let you get away with nothing. You couldn't hide it. It was almost like he had a spiritual discernment that he could see through your lies and your fakeness. But I had sworn to God that I wasn't going to lie anymore. I was just going to be who I was. So, when I joined United Student Fellowship, they knew who I was. I didn't pretend anymore. I basically told them I had lied about it when the first time they met me. But this is the real me. I went and filed bankruptcy not soon after that to pay back the girlfriend all the money that I had stolen from her by my lies. So at 21, here, a 21-year-old kid filing bankruptcy, but that was the course that I took, because I didn't know how to stop the lawsuits and all the things that were coming against me. And I put together a payment plan instead of bankruptcy, where I wanted everybody I owed to get back what I owed them. So Sears and Goodyear and all these other people, JCPenney and all of them, they all got their money from me over the next couple of years, because I just believe I got to pay my debts. And I went through a lot. A lot of people didn't believe a real change and transformation, even people on that campus, because I still lived in Raleigh and I still had a lot of friendships. And of course, NC State was where United Student Fellowship was. So that's where my life was centered around. But a lot of people there knew my story, what I had done to my best friend. They knew how I had treated the girlfriend. And so I had a lot of crazy stuff. There was one time that there was a banner that was put on the campus of the church, of the school, where you had to cross under a railroad, that there were some people who had put the banner of what I had owed to her and say my name, saying pay back so-and-so. All the details were there so that the whole campus would know what I'd done. And here I am now, supposed to be a Christian, and I had this kind of reputation. But let me tell you what happened, what God did in that year. Those friends in that United Student Fellowship, they surrounded me. They loved me. Bible studies on Friday, studies every night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We were up sometimes at 11 and 12 and 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning just studying the Word of God. My life radically changed. I worked. I paid back everything I owe. I took the abuse that I was getting from other people because I deserved it, honestly. And my life changed. And folks saw that change. People really saw that. This is where I met Tabitha. Tabitha was really good friends with my friend Alex, who I had taken his girlfriend from, and she was friends. So she knew the story of what I had done. And she hated me. She was one of the people who didn't like me either. And so, but she was also a part of United Student Fellowship. And she saw that this guy who had been such a bad person on that campus, his life really changed. And so we just became friends too a little bit, but she was always kind of, suspicious of me in that sense. And so, but I just made a radical change in my heart, my life to give my life to the Lord. And so for that year was life changing and transformational. So much so that the next year, even before the anniversary of my salvation, I had become a minister of the gospel. April 13th, 1986 is when I preached my first sermon. That the change and the transformation, those first 9 months of salvation was like a seminary education where I was just poured into, so that it was almost like I knew the word of God and I knew God's plan and God's purpose for my life, that he wanted me to serve him in some ministerial way. And I heard the call of God to trust him with my life, that he was going to fast track me into ministry. Even Shelton and others were like, this is a little too fast, but I was so convicted and so convinced that even the people who doubted that I could be a minister in less than a year of being saved, they even came to a point that says, you know what, we see the hand of God on your life. And even Shelton and others were willing to say yes. And even my church back home in Roxboro, they saw it. And I went back home to my church. I wanted my first initial sermon not to be at United Students Fellowship, to be back at my home church in Roxboro, so that those people would know that this man had changed and I was a different person. And so I went back on April 13th, 1986, preached my first sermon. All my friends from the United Student Fellowship who could travel with us back to Roxboro went. The whole church was packed. I even had family members there. I had my granddaddy, who my grandfather on my mama's side, who at that time was one of the biggest bootleggers, if you would, in the South, there in North Carolina. He was in the service. My uncle Bobby, who is now passed away, he was in the service. And when I gave the invitation, 8 souls came to the Lord. And of those 8 souls, one was my grandfather, the other was my uncle. My granddaddy gave his life to the Lord. And listen, after he got so radically saved from that time on in his life, he wasn't perfect. Now, I'm not saying he was like a perfect guy, but he no longer sold bootleg. He tore up those steals. He changed his whole life around from that day. My uncle turned his life all around. He was living a certain way in which his own life, and he turned his life around as well. And I saw them. My uncle could not read. He had some issues with reading, like he has really strong dyslexia, and he couldn't read. But somehow God could miraculously allow him to read the Bible. And so I watched him. He couldn't hardly read other things, but he could sit there and read the Bible. And then God gave him a gift to be able to play. And so he would go into the parks and into the places with the people that he knew that were unsaved, and he could play the instrument. He went and bought all this sound equipment and all these musical instruments, and he played the musical instruments in the parks and in the places and got folks saved, and it just radically changed his life. And when he died, and he did die some time later, the first instruments that the piece had were my uncle's instruments that my grandmother had donated to our church to be the first pianos and sound systems and everything from my uncle, who came to the Lord at my very first sermon. My grandfather, later they had to cut off his legs because he got gangrene and he lost both his legs, but he never lost his faith. And he died not too long after him getting saved. He died, but he died knowing the Lord. And I'm so thankful that I'm going to see him in heaven. And it's such a blessing. My other grandfather, who was the builder grandfather, he also radically changed his life, so much so that when he died, we went to the funeral, and we did not know this, but the week before my grandfather had a massive heart attack and died, my grandfather on my dad's side, at the funeral, the preacher came and said, we had revival all last week, and you all don't know, but that your grandfather, your dad, your husband, he came to this service, and he was at revival every single night. And we didn't believe my grandfather would do anything like this, but he was so radically changed and his life around that he was. So anyway, I just am excited about what God was able to do to let my life, even as young as it was, to be a light to my family, to a campus, even to a city. And so that's so exciting what God's did. So April 13th, 1986 was the launching of my ministry in the gospel, Jesus Christ.